Scientists are considering the idea of giving iron supplements to the ocean to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. However, there are concerns that this could lead to harmful algae blooms, dead zones, and the release of greenhouse gases. Ocean engineering is being explored as a way to tweak the ocean's chemistry and absorb more carbon dioxide. Iron supplement. Iron supplement. Carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide. Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. Controversial. Controversial. Harmful species. Harmful species. Enrichment. Enrichment. Nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide. Greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gas. Symposium. Symposium. Scripps Oceanographic. Scripps Oceanographic.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. WBUR climate and environment correspondent Barbara Moran. Welcome back to The Common.
Hello, hello.
Barb, you have a very interesting story for us today.
Yes.
So apparently a bunch of scientists want to give the ocean an iron supplement as a way to help remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Right?
That's pretty much right.
Okay. Break that down for us.
Okay, right. So the idea is to put iron in the ocean, which would trigger algae blooms, and the algae eat carbon dioxide, doing photosynthesis. I was going to make algae noises. Nom, 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 nom.
Yeah.
Right. Perfect. So the algae eat carbon dioxide, they die, and they take all the carbon down into the ocean with them. And that gets carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That's the idea, right? But as you can imagine, the idea is pretty controversial for a number of reasons.
Why?
Okay. So when you do these experiments, or when you do this, you're maybe not sure what kind of algae you're going to get. And this is Pat Glibert. She is a algae expert at the University of Maryland, and this is one of her major concerns with this.
What we've learned from the iron experiments is that we don't always grow the algae we want. We can grow harmful species, toxic species, and several of the iron enrichment experiments showed exactly that.
So she's talking about some experiments that were done in the 90s, because this idea has actually been around for a while.
Okay.
And so a bunch of ships went out into the ocean in various places and sort of dumped dissolved iron into the ocean, and it triggered these algae blooms, right? But those algae blooms, there was a mix of algae that they didn't expect, including some toxic algae. And, her argument is like, look, you did these experiments and this is what you got, so let's not do any more, right? And there's other possible problems too, right? You could create these dead zones, these low oxygen zones where like fish die. You could maybe give off nitrous oxide, which happens sometimes, and that's a greenhouse gas, which is kind of the opposite of what you want to do. And various other sort of questions and issues with it. So there's a lot of, potential negatives with this.
And so what we're discussing right now is something that falls in the realm of ocean engineering. Can you just explain what that is?
Yeah. So the ocean sucks up a lot of carbon dioxide naturally.
Yeah.
Right? Which is great for us.
Right.
Thanks, ocean.
Thank you.
So the idea of ocean engineering is tweaking with the ocean's chemistry or biology in a way that would make it suck up more carbon dioxide.
How did you come to this story? I understand you talked to some scientists who are actually from the Woods Hole area, which is not far from here.
I was at this huge climate change conference in December, and I was at a symposium, and these two really big shot scientists were talking about this, right? One from Scripps Oceanographic and one from Woods Hole, these two like powerhouse institutions. And I was like, oh my God, they're actually talking about this. Like, seriously, you know? I can't believe I'm hearing this. So I talked to both of them after, and I talked to Ken Bissler, who is this scientist at Woods Hole, very like conservative, very, you know, well-respected, not nuts. And I sat down with him. I'm like, this idea sounds wacko. So why are you even considering it? And here's one thing he told me.
I think I was more cautious 20 years ago before it became so obvious that this planet's on fire. Literally the wildfires, the people dying from heat, the increase in storms and their intensity. So doing nothing is really not an option for me anymore.
And he said something a lot of other scientists said to me was that the most recent UN climate report that came out, you know, really changed their thinking. And that the climate report said it's not enough to just lower emissions anymore. We really have to figure out ways to pull carbon out of the sky. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Bissler and others have argued to me that, you know, we know that this technique works, right? So why not investigate it? Why not do some experiments and figure out how well it works, if we might be able to do it safely, get some sort of ethical guidelines around it, you know, and just take a closer look at it because we're going to need something.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So walking away from that conversation with Ken, what were you thinking?
I told him flat out, I'm like, okay, I thought this was nuts, but now I see where you're coming from, right? I mean, I think the climate crisis is getting dire, right? And it's going to get, you know, kind of bad in the next 10 years or so. And people are going to be looking for ways to really affect climate change quickly, really draw down carbon quickly. And in a way, it's better to have some understanding of how this might work so we know the pros and cons, or we know that it won't work, right? We know that something else might work better.
So what does this next step of experimentation look like?
Right. So right now, the scientists I've been speaking to have funding to start planning for experiments, and they are hoping to do field experiments sort of out in the ocean as early as next year, if they can get funding. That's not a definite, but I am fairly confident that they will be going ahead with experiments in the next couple of years, if they're not blocked somehow. There have been other sort of attempts at climate engineering that have been stopped by towns or cities or countries out of concern with tinkering with the environment. So there could be something that stops it, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. There's also the fact that for-profit companies are interested in these experiments. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's another really compelling argument for the scientists to do something, right? Because, you know, as Ken Bissler and other scientists told me, there are already for-profit companies planning to do this or already beginning to do this or similar ocean engineering things, you know, cash in on the carbon credit market, right?
Real quick, can you explain the carbon credit market?
So I don't know if you've ever like flown recently and, you know, you could buy it, you know, when you buy your ticket, it's like, oh, offset your carbon, you know, you could pay $80 here. So there are all these places that you can pay to offset your carbon by doing something like planting a tree. And so it's a very profitable market, very poorly regulated, very fishy, right? Lots of people trying to get into it to make money.
And this experimentation with iron in the ocean is could possibly be another avenue for that.
Absolutely, yeah. And so the scientists argue, like, look, there's already this commercial interest in this. And so wouldn't it be better if we had some actual scientists doing some research that was open to the public, and then we would have some clue whether or not this is going to work, because people are going to go out and do it anyway.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Maybe you've heard that there's a civil war coming.
Tyrants disarm the people they intend to oppress.
That with more than 100 gun deaths a day in America, the powers that be are going to have to do something.
They don't like the Second Amendment. They want to get rid of the Second Amendment.
You've heard that the government has always hated an armed populace.
All they want to do is take guns away from law-abiding citizens.
But in my 8 years of gun reporting, the game is rigged. My name is Alon Stevens, and I'm an investigative reporter. What if I told you that when it comes to the US government, we're the biggest gun dealers on the block? That the halls of American power know exactly what I know. That guns aren't just who we are. They're what we do best.
Guns are flying off the shelves. Ghost gun mill in Dorchester.
Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
This is The Gun Machine, how America is forged by the gun industry. A new podcast from WBUR and The Trace. Search and follow The Gun Machine in your podcast app.
And we are back with more from Barbara Moran. I have another question here about us folks here in the Boston region, right? These experiments are not happening here yet.
Right.
Right?
Correct.
How can this affect us?
Yeah. To be clear, like the places they're talking about doing these iron experiments are sort of far away from Boston. But that doesn't mean it's not important to us. I would argue that it's like really important to us.
I mean, we're a coastal city.
Yeah, we're a coastal city. Things that happen in one part of the ocean go to other parts of the ocean, right? It's a very dynamic system. It's all interconnected. And I think as a coastal city, as people who make a lot of living from the ocean, and just people who are thinking about what the ocean might mean for climate change going ahead, we need to be thinking about these things. However, there are other ocean engineering techniques being discussed which could work perfectly well here. One is sort of changing the ocean chemistry to make it less acidic, and that would help it absorb more carbon dioxide. There are a couple other electrochemical things. I don't know if any are actually being planned for the Boston area, but they're being talked about by Boston scientists. So some experiments might happen here, but I don't know of any being planned.
Well, Barb, I mean, this is a question of the future, and I'm wondering what exactly are you looking out for, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just wondering what the next year is going to hold, what the next 10 years are going to hold for how quickly we advance this research and whether it becomes ever more urgent, right? Or if something else might appear that takes away the need for this.
Well, Barb, thank you so much. As always, it's been a pleasure and enlightening.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming through.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
That's WBUR climate and environment correspondent Barbara Moran. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. Folks, if you like what you're hearing, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple or Spotify. Rate and review us. It would be a huge help. Thank you to everybody who already has, and thank you to everybody who's doing it now. And if you want to get in touch with us, hit us up on Instagram at WBUR.TheCommon or send us an email at thecommon@WBUR.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.